Union Gospel Press, Bible Expositor and Illuminator, Fall Quarter, June, July, and August 2025, teaching the lesson through Heart of the Lesson. This unit is God is All-Knowing. Today's lesson is God warns Pharaoh through dreams. The lesson date is October 5th, 2025. God warns Pharaoh through dreams. Lesson text, Genesis 41, 25 through 36. Related scriptures, Genesis chapter 40, verses 1 through 4, verses 37 through 57, chapter 50, verses 15 through 21, Psalm chapter 105, verses 16 through 22, Daniel chapter 2, verses 17 through 49. The time is 1886 BC. The place from Egypt. Golden text. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Genesis 41:28. Introduction. As soon as Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, God sent his redemptive plan into motion. First, he promised that one of Eve's descendants would crush the head of the deceiving serpent. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Then he narrowed the focus of that plan to one family. The restoration of God's blessing to humanity would come through Abraham and Sarah. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, and reference chapter 17, verse 19. By the time of Genesis 41, God's chosen family consisted of Abraham's grandson Jacob, Israel, and his children. Jacob's favorite son Joseph had provoked his 11 brothers to jealousy by recounting 2 dreams that prophesied that he would rule over them, and they had responded by selling him into slavery. As Joseph would later explain, God intended from the start to bring him to Egypt through his brother's wicked plot. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. The reason for that becomes evident in chapter 41, which recounts a famine that endangered not only Egypt, but also the entire Mesopotamian world, including Jacob and his family. Our lesson outlines are 1. God's revelation, Genesis chapter 41, verses 25 through 32, and 2. Joseph's wisdom, Genesis chapter 41, verses 33 through 36. Exposition, Genesis chapter 41, verses 25 through 28. 25. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. 26. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. 27. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine. 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Exposition, Genesis chapter 41, verses 29 through 32. 29. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. 30. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. 31. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be grievous. 32. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Genesis 41, verses 33 through 35. 33. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man, discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. 34. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up a fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years, 35, and let them gather all the food for those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Genesis 41, verse 32. Verse 36. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Preparing to teach the lesson. This lesson begins the second unit of the quarter. The theme is God's omniscience. He knows everything. He knows anything that can be known. Nothing takes God by surprise. Today's lesson focuses on the story of Joseph in Genesis and how God knew both the smallest details of his life and the details of a future famine. God warned Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, through his dreams and then gave knowledge to Joseph to interpret those dreams. Today's aim, facts, to see how God used knowledge of future events. Principle, to understand that God knows everything and can share that knowledge with his people. Application, to encourage students to trust God's care. Developing the lesson. Is there anything God does not know? Over and over in the Bible, we see the one who always knows all things. This characteristic is called omniscience. Number 1, God sends Pharaoh dreams. Genesis chapter 41, verse 25. The events in chapter 40 prepared Pharaoh and his officials and Joseph for the dramatic event in chapter 41. Joseph was in prison, along with 2 of Pharaoh's officials. God worked through their dreams and gave Joseph the correct interpretation. The 2 officials were the king's chief butler and chief baker. The captain of the king's guard instructed Joseph to serve them. One night they both had strange dreams. Since there is no one to explain their dreams to them, they were sad. Perhaps in their previous occupations in the palace, they had access to the royal magicians. Joseph did something that we should do when people are sad. He encouraged them to turn to God. Joseph trusted God to give them the interpretation. This is similar to what God did in the lives of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah many years later. Reference Daniel chapter 2 verses 17 through 49. The chief butler shared his dreams of a vine with 3 branches. When it budded, it immediately blossomed, and he saw ripened grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in his hand, so he squeezed the grapes and handed the cup to Pharaoh. After Joseph heard the dream, God enabled him to interpret it. Since God knows the minds of all people, Joseph told the butler that the 3 branches represented 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh would restore him to his previous position. The chief baker was watching and listening to this great interpretation, so he also told Joseph his dream. The baker dreamed of 3 baskets of bread on his head. The top basket had wonderful baked goods for the king to enjoy, but birds ate the bread out of the basket. God also gave Joseph the interpretation, but it was not good news. Joseph told the baker that the 3 baskets represented 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh would lift off the baker's head and hang his body on a tree. The birds would eat his flesh. After 3 days, on Pharaoh's birthday, both interpretations were fulfilled. Even though Joseph asked the butler to help him, the butler forgot about Joseph until Pharaoh had his 2 mysterious dreams 2 years later. Our lesson text picks up in the middle of that story. Genesis chapter 42 verses 25 through 26 contains the instructions of Pharaoh's dreams from the beginning of this chapter. Number 2, God interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Genesis 41, verses 26 through 32. In these verses, we see God's omniscience in two ways. First, he revealed the interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams to Joseph. Second, God revealed the future through Pharaoh's dreams. These two dreams were one message from God. The 7 good cows and the 7 good heads of grain both foretold 7 good years. The 7 thin cows and the 7 empty heads of grain, blasted by the east wind, foretold 7 years of famine. Take note, the golden text in verse 28. This is more than a prophet or a psychic can do. Only an omniscient God can say and show these things. We see God working in the minds of Pharaoh and Joseph, using a dream that revealed something about to happen. God's knowledge is eternal. Joseph continued to explain Pharaoh's dreams in detail. 7 years of great plenty were coming, but 7 years of severe famine would follow. God gave the double dream because he had established these events, and they would certainly come to pass. Number 3, God blesses Joseph and his chosen family. Genesis chapter 41, verses 33 through 36. We see God's prosperous plan for Joseph's life in the last part of our text. Joseph told Pharaoh to look for a wise man to oversee the land of Egypt. God had a plan for Joseph and a plan for the people. Joseph said Pharaoh should appoint officials to gather 1/5 of the grain during the years of plenty. Those officials would store the grain during the years of plenty so the people would not starve during the famine. Years later, all that God had revealed in the dreams and interpretations had come to pass. During the famine, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt seeking food. There was a great reunion, and God provided for the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In Genesis 50, we see Joseph's brothers lying to him again, but he used the wisdom that our omniscient God gave him. We see Abraham's family line saved and preserved. Psalms 105, verses 16 through 22, recalls this event and reminds us that all things were done by God. Illustrating the lesson, God knows all. Pharaoh is the title of the king of Egypt. When we think of Egypt, what symbol comes to mind? A pyramid? This represents Egypt and Pharaoh. Our lesson today teaches us that God knows all. Concluding the lesson, we see the hand of God working in Egypt and its governing leaders. We read of God speaking to multiple people through visions and Joseph's interpretations. The God of heaven knows everything everything happening in the world and directs events so that he receives the glory. Anticipating the next lesson. Our lesson next week will be in Acts. We will study the story of Ananias and Sapphira to understand that God knows everything in our minds and hearts. Practical points. Number 1, God prepares for the protection of his people. Genesis chapter 41, verses 25 through 27. Number 2, natural disasters like famine show the earth still suffers under the cause of sin. Genesis chapter 41, verses 28 through 31. Reference Genesis chapter 3, verse 17, and Romans chapter 8, verses 20 through 22. Number 3, when God determines to do something, it will certainly happen. Genesis chapter 41, verse 32. Number 4, amid trials, God expects us not only to trust him, but also to use practical wisdom. Verses 33 through 36. Number 5, God has given humans the responsibility of caring for the earth. Genesis chapter 41, verses 33 through 36, and Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Number 6, natural disasters are a good opportunity for Christians to display both the wisdom and the love of Christ. Genesis chapter 41, verses 33 through 36. Reference Acts chapter 11, 27 through 30. Illustrated high points. The dream was doubled, Genesis chapter 41, verse 32. When good public speakers come to a key sentence in their speech, they often repeat it for emphasis, perhaps even saying it slower the second time, so that the audience doesn't fail to miss it. Hearing repetition like that is similar to coming across a bolded or italicized sentence in a book. That is what God did for Pharaoh by doubling his dream. Set him over the land. The second in command role Joseph suggested sounds a lot like what came to be known as a vizier in later Egyptian periods. Although viziers were not first in command, they had similar powers to Pharaoh and actually did a lot more active ruling than Pharaoh did. Today, one of the closest parallels to a vizier is the role of a prime minister or a chancellor. For example, in Germany, the president is considered the head of the state and has veto power, but the chancellor holds most of the governmental responsibilities. That the land perish not, verse 36. God expects us to show Christ's love to others by preparing for moments of crisis and responding wisely to them. One Christian organization that has consistently put that principle into practice emphasizes that local churches are often in the best position to offer help and relief in the wake of natural disasters or other crises. Individual churches can have a different kind of impact on their local community than a centralized relief program could ever have. Their outreach can be more personal, and it can also open up opportunities to share the gospel as people see God's love in action through his church. Golden text. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Genesis 41:28. Golden text illuminated. God reveals himself and loves to make his plans known to his people. One example of this is found in Genesis 41. God reveals himself in multiple ways. Through the dreams of Pharaoh, through the interpretations of Joseph, and through his own sovereign control of life and history. First, God communicated through the dreams of Pharaoh. God communicated through dreams, however, and he communicated the future. Later, Joseph revealed to Pharaoh that his two dreams were one and the same. Both revealed a devastating famine soon to break upon the land. God's sovereign freedom is on full display here as he A. reveals himself to a pagan king, B. controls the content of Pharaoh's dreams, and C. reveals the future through these dreams. Second, God communicated through Joseph. Joseph made clear that none of his powers were from himself, but granted to him by God. It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Verse 16. He then declared to Pharaoh in verse 28, what God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Joseph was merely the agent, a messenger. God was the sovereign source of that message. Third, God communicated through his own sovereign control of life and history. Again, Joseph declared twice to Pharaoh, God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. Verse 25. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Verse 28. Joseph explained to Pharaoh that God was more than merely aware of what would happen. He controlled what would happen. God was the great doer, actor, and Lord, not just over the land of Israel, but over the kingdom of Egypt as well. Thus, through the dreams and the interpretation, God revealed himself as absolutely sovereign over all events that transpire in history. What implications may we glean from this for our lives today? Number one, God knows more than just know the future. He controls the future. God showed Pharaoh what he was about to do, not what he had merely seen unfolding in the future. God does not just predict the future, he predestines it. God knows the future because he worketh all things after the counsel of his own will. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. However, we must also remember he does not tempt people to sin. James chapter 1, verse 13. Number 2, God reveals and communicates his plans that he may be worshipped rightly. God is not truly reassured unless he is treasured as the God who has absolute dominion over life and history. Without his sovereignty, God's love and compassion would be powerless. Without his sovereignty, even his omniscience would only be a hollow comfort. But it is a great comfort in the soul of a believer that the God who has spoken is the God who is sovereign. This is what helps us see that God can be trusted and that all fear is illogical in light of his sovereignty. The God who has revealed himself also manages the world with flawless perfection. Therefore, come feast or famine, war or peace, we take great comfort knowing that God has already shown us what he is going to do. Heart of the lesson. From a human perspective, it is often hard to see the sovereignty of God. In other words, it does not appear that God is in control of history. Many things seem random, chaotic, and out of control. Yet the word of God assures us that God remains at the helm of all events in history. One vivid display of God's providence came in the life of Joseph. From Genesis 37 through 50, God revealed that he can use all events, including people's sin and evil, for good. In Genesis 41 specifically, we see God's control of a famine that affected Egypt and the surrounding countries. God revealed that future famine to Pharaoh through dreams that he later interpreted through Joseph. In both Joseph's interpretation and the context of Joseph's life, we find three principles in God's control that give us unconquerable hope. It is crucial to pay attention to Joseph's precise language. The famine was something God would bring about. Sovereignty is not a spectator sport, and God is not passive. He actively rules and guides all things by his power, for his glory, and for our everlasting good. Oh, what comfort and strength that supplies in our struggles and fears. Number 2, God's control over the events of history is specific and expansive. Genesis chapter 41, verse 29 through 36. We see this in the detail of the famine. It would be a famine of 7 years. Not more, not less, 7. God both called for a famine upon the land, Psalms chapter 105, verse 16, and determined its exact duration. So, it is with all history. God numbers the stars and knows them by name. Psalms chapter 147, verse 4, Isaiah chapter 40, verse 26. God determines the lifespan of the sparrow. Matthew chapter 10, verse 29. God superintends the paths of the arrows. Reference 1 Kings 22, 34. Every roll of the dice. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 33. And even who would be involved in the death of his son. Acts chapter 4, verses 27 to 28. This is our Father's world, and he has authority over all of it. Number 3, God controls our history is centered on his Son, whom he sent. The sovereignty of God is not the mere brute force control of history for its own sake. God's control relates to his Son. We see this in the ripple effects of Joseph's life. God sent the famine upon Egypt, which would lead to the preservation of Israel in Egypt. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. That would lead to the Exodus over 400 years later. the conquest of Canaan, the establishment of Israel as a nation, the eventual arrival of the Messiah, his death and resurrection, and finally his triumphant return and global kingdom. The events of Joseph's life were part of God's larger plan for history culminating in Christ. That is true of our lives as well. The details of our lives are all part of God's global plan for history. That gives great courage and comfort, since we know that God is leading us to a future kingdom and eternal bliss to come. Additional resources: Union Gospel Press Sunday School Lesson by Haven of Rest Missionary Baptist Church on YouTube, and Union Gospel Press Sunday School Lesson Questions by Jordan Christian Center, also on YouTube.